Everyday Moodlings. I'm your host, Jeree Parks, and in this episode we are going to be working with background stamps. In fact, this whole month we're going to be looking at stamps, but we wanted to start out with background stamps. And what I wanted to share with you today is two of my favorite ways to use background stamps, and I will quantify that by saying that these are my favorite current ways to use background stamps. I'm sure later on I'll find something else to do with them, and then that'll be my favorite way. But for now, we're gonna stick with how I use them right now, and I'm going to show you two different ways. Obviously, I just said that. I'm going to show you how to do a resist with a background stamp, and then I'm going to show you how to use just like a partial imprint of your background stamp to add some texture to your work. So we're going to start, and then I'll take one of those samples and make it into a completed project. The second one you'll see on the blog finished as well. So we're going to start out with this larger background stamp, and I'm going to show you how to do a resist, and then we're going to color it in with some gelatos. So you're going to need your background stamp, and I am using clear embossing powder. So that means that the color of your background is going to show through after you add in the gelatos. So I am using what's called mixed media paper, very similar to watercolor paper. And it's kind of a creamy white, almost ivory. So if you wanted a different color to show through, you could do that. I'm going to stick with this. You're also going to need some embossing ink. And I love these little daubers. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on the music. I'll be right back. So there's my first way that I like to use background stamps, to use it to create a resist. Love gelatos. They're so much fun to work with, and you really get a unique look every time, each and every time you use them. And I'm thinking this feels like a birthday card to me. So this completed project you'll be able to find on the blog once I'm done. But we're going to move on to my next favorite way to use background stamps, which is to do some just partial imaging to create interesting texture. Okay, so I have a small tag here. It's actually going to be layered on top of another tag, and my background stamp, I'm using Stays On because I'm using a text stamp, and I always feel like Stays On does such a good job with text. And I'm actually going to color my tag with a little stain, and I might add a little paint in there too, I'm not sure. So we have our tag stained. I'm just going to hit it real quick with a heat gun to dry it a bit. Okay, for this technique, I really like to use a stamp that is not mounted on anything. So this one is a rubber stamp that I'm not going to put on a block. Actually, the backing on here doesn't stick very well to a block. So if I was using a clear stamp, I would leave it unblocked as well. And I'm just going to apply it in sections, but not to the whole thing. And I'm going to go ahead and protect my work surface just for easy cleanup in the video. We dried a little bit. Let's re-ink. There. I don't necessarily have to keep inking it up. In fact, sometimes I don't want that. Sometimes I want a little lighter print. Sometimes I want a variation where it's light and dark, so I can tap off some of the ink and get a lighter texture or a lighter print. Now this creates more variation than if I were to just ink the whole background stamp and press the image along the whole thing. This just creates a little more sense of texture and interest and variety versus doing the whole thing or stamping the whole image across the whole tag. So we're going to leave it like this. Now this is a really fun technique for a larger piece such as an art journaling page, because you can kind of pick and choose where you want to add in a little text and it kind of seems to fade away into the background, and I really like that look. But I do think I want to add just a little bit of paint to the edges. This is just a craft paint. It's a pretty thick one, and I'm just using my favorite tool, my fingers. I mean, if I can't get a little messy in my craft room, really, what's the point? I did use a textured cardstock here, and that gives it even more texture. And I can do just a little dry brushing with my finger, give it some more interest. Alrighty, so that's my second way that I like to use background stamps, which is just to do a partial print or a partial image. This was the first way with our gelatos and a heat emboss resist. I'm going to go ahead and clean up, and then I'll be back to go ahead and finish up the project with this tag. Okay, so I got everything cleaned up and we're back, and I have all my pieces, including my piece with my partial stamping. I'm going to go ahead and turn on the music and we will finish up this. done with our fall tag. Did a lot of lumpy bumpy layering on here. Still got to put a topper on it. A couple of things to note here. I have some idea of where I'm going when I start these tags, but it usually goes wherever it wants to go. I don't try to figure it all out before I start the video, because I want you to see what my process is like. I don't often get out the glue gun, but when you're working with silk flowers, I just think it's easier to use a heat gun than another type of glue. And I do often try to use just a small amount of contrasting color. You see that actually quite a bit in my work, because it draws your eye to where I want it to go, which is this little autumn sticker right here. So if you have any questions about anything I did, any of the techniques that I used, please be sure to let me know. And in the blog, and I'll link to the blog to this video if you're watching on YouTube, I want you to go ahead and share your favorite ways to use background stamps too. I look forward to reading them. Until next time, I'm Drury Parks with Everyday Moodlings, and we'll see you next week.